This is not the small print of the gospel. This is not some hidden message in Scripture. Jesus made it very clear that a decision to follow was a decision to die, to surrender everything to Him. And so Jesus turns to the crowd, and He turns to you and me, and He asks the one question that will ultimately define our lives. Are you a fan or a follower?
DTR. Some of you will recognize what those letters stand for. If you're not sure, let me help you out. If you are a young man in a relationship with a young woman, then chances are these letters are enough to strike fear into your heart. You may run away from, postpone, you may dread the DTR talk. Some young men will even terminate a relationship if they feel like the DTR talk is imminent. It is that official talk that takes place in every romantic relationship. Do you know what it stands for, DTR? Define the relationship. You sit down and you decide where things are going. Have things moved from casual to committed? I remember this date I went on in high school. On the very first date, the girl tried to have the DTR talk with me. First date, DTR. I got out of there PDQ. I just ran away.
Well, yeah, I had never heard that term either, Bill. And apparently he seems to be thinking it's something that every male should know. And I wasn't really sure what he meant when he started talking about it. But what I want you to understand and what we're going to be talking about tonight is about being not a fan, but a follower. And so we are going to be discussing our relationship with Jesus Christ. Brian has just posted the notes for the message. They should be coming up. You should be able to get them. The note card hander-outer thingy should have distributed them. You guys ever remember growing up those kids who actually went out and built a lemonade stand business? You've seen them before. Maybe even your kids may have done it. But there really are professional lemonade stands out there. So logic would dictate that some kid somewhere ended up going into the lemonade stand business full time. He wanted to try it out one hot summer afternoon, maybe after seeing some other kids in his neighborhood trying it. Or maybe he saw one set up at a baseball park and thought, I can make a little money on top of my allowance with this. So he tries it out. Gets his dad to help him set up a rickety little stand, hand paints a sign, lemonade, 50 cents. And after one successful day, he tries it again. And again. And again. And then he gets invited to bring his lemonade stand to a middle school baseball game. He ups his price to $2 a glass, and pretty soon he's got a lot of invitations to bring his lemonade stand to all kinds of events. He's really getting busy, taking his lemonade stand all over town. Sure, he's making a really nice profit, but now things are a lot busier, a lot more professional. It's taking up more time than he expected. He's got to make special orders on lemons. He has to keep track of all his expenses on a spreadsheet. And what started as a little hobby has become a time-consuming commitment. Now, I know, you're sitting there thinking, what kid knows what a spreadsheet is, okay? I understand that, but we're using this as an illustration, so just bear with me. And in that moment, he has to make a choice. Is this going to become a kind of career? Is he going to hire a few employees to share the load? What will he choose? Some of you out there are thinking, maybe I should get into the lemonade stand business. And some of you are thinking, I wish my kid knew what a spreadsheet was. Whatever you're thinking, you understand that moment. There's a moment when we all have to make a decision. Is this a hobby or is it a career? Is this for fun or is it something more? Am I trying this out or am I investing in it? You know, those kind of moments aren't really unique to just the business world. I think a much more common experience lies in the realm of relationships. And as Kyle pointed out in the opening video, we get to deal with the DTR talk. Now, some of you recognize what those letters stand for, and since you've just heard what he said, it's define the relationship. How many of you knew what that was before you ever heard that? For a young man in a relationship, those letters can strike terror. They dread the DTR talk. It makes single men so comfortable that they will use the initials DTR so they don't have to say it. The objective is to postpone, run away, and put off DTR as long as you possibly can. In fact, many men are so afraid of DTR that they will terminate relationship when they sense the DTR talk is imminent. Okay? This is an official talk that takes place at some point in a romantic relationship. I've determined the level of commitment. You define the relationship and decide where things stand. Is it casual? Is it committed? Over the next several weeks, I want all of us to examine our relationship with Jesus Christ. Now, I get to the fact that for some of you, this is kind of a first date, and you're not exactly sure what to make of all this. Well, you can just kind of sit and listen. You're not ready for the DTR talk. Maybe you're not ready for the talk yet, but I think most of us in this room need to have a DTR talk with Jesus. We need to define that relationship. We need to find out where we stand. Okay. See, the reality is, define the relationship, Megley. So in your mind, I want you to picture this. You're sitting in a local coffee shop. You grab a snack and you got your coffee, and then you walk towards the back where it isn't so crowded, and you find a seat at a small table. You take a sip of your drink and you enjoy a few quiet minutes. Now imagine that Jesus walks in and comes over and sits down next to you at the table. You know it's him because he's wearing the name tag that says, "Hi, I'm Jesus," and he's got a blue sash on, so you know it's Jesus. And you're unsure what to say. In an awkward moment, you try to break the silence by asking him to turn your turn your water into wine, and he kind of gives you the same look he used to give Peter. Before he has a chance to respond, though, you suddenly realize you haven't prayed for your food. You decide to say your prayer out loud, hoping that Jesus will be impressed. You start off okay, but understandably you get nervous and pray 3 things we pray: to love thee more dearly, to see thee more clearly, to follow thee more nearly, day by day by day. You quickly say amen, and then you realize that you just quoted Ben Stiller's prayer from Meet the Parents. Before you have a chance to make things more awkward, Jesus slips past the small talk and gets right to the point. He looks you in the eye and says, "It's time we define this relationship." He wants to know how you feel about him. Is your relationship with Jesus exclusive? Is it a casual weekend thing, or has it moved past that? How would your relationship with him be defined? What exactly is your level of commitment? And to look at Christ's invitation, we're going to be using a verse that clearly lays out what it means to be a follower of Jesus Christ. It's from the book of Luke, in the 9th chapter, in verse 23. And I'm going to read from the Amplified, but it says, "And he said to all, if any person wills to come after me, let him deny himself, disown himself, lose sight of himself and his own interest, refuse and give himself, lose sight of himself and his own interest, refuse and give up himself, and take up his cross daily and follow me. Cleave steadfastly to me, conform wholly to my example in living, and in need be, in dying also." I think many of you welcome this DR. I think many of us would welcome the DR because you are ready to move to a different level of commitment. You're ready to move past the casual and past the convenient into something more devoted, something more committed. So you're ready for this talk. Some of you, however, are not, because you kind of like the setup you have with Jesus now. I mean, he's a nice guy and everything, but you only want to see him on the weekends. And it's awful nice that you can sip some lattes in the coffee bar while you're in church. You kind of like that what you have going, and this idea of being more committed, this idea of being in at a different level, you're kind of anxious, kind of worries you. Maybe you even go to the fight or flight response. But what we want to do is define the relationship. Where do you stand with Jesus Christ? And here's how I'd like to ask that question. Are you a fan or are you a follower of Jesus Christ? Now, some of you are wondering why I'd asked that question like that. I mean, we're all followers, right? That's why we're here. Well, don't jump to your answer too quickly, because here is how you define follower. A follower is a person who imitates, copies, or takes as a model or ideal. A follower of Jesus Christ, then, would take him as who you copy, who you take as a model, who is your ideal, who you imitate. But the word fan is simply an enthusiastic admirer. You know, a lot of us are fans for a lot of different things. Many of us are really fanatical sports fans. We watch the games, we cheer for the team. Some of us even own the jerseys of our favorite players. We understand the concept of being a fan of sports. And my concern is that church has the potential to very easily become a stadium full of fans of Jesus. And Jesus never cared anything about having fans. If you define a fan as an enthusiastic admirer, then fans are not important to him. I think we have a tendency to come together once a week and be fans of Jesus. We sit down in our seats and we open up our programs and we applaud at certain times, and we leave somehow thinking that as the fans, it's all done for us. We get in the car and we evaluate the sermon, and we kind of give the service and the song selection a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And we come back and we do it again next week. And I get the fact that some of you are really big fans. I mean, you're really into all of this. You know all the songs. You don't need the page numbers for the Bible. You know where to turn. You're pretty fast. And you kind of look around to see how much faster you are than anybody else when you're jumping through your Bible. You got your sword drill abilities in shape. You're big fans of Jesus, and being a fan feels pretty good. We can feel really good about ourselves because in these great admirers, we're great admirers of Christ. But he never cared about having fans. So we'll be honest with ourselves. If we really search our hearts and begin to define our relationship with Jesus Christ, there are 3 questions for you have to answer. First, why are you here? If you read through the Gospels, Jesus at different points in his ministry would draw a line in the sand and he would separate the fans from the followers. On one such instance is in John chapter 6. Jesus is in the height of his ministry, and we read that large crowds were following Jesus everywhere. He was extremely popular. He was working miracles. He had just provided food for 5,000 with bread and fishes. He was a miracle man. In verse 2, it says that they were coming because of the miracles and because of the food. The reason the crowds were showing up wasn't because they were worshiping him or they were following him. It was because it was a entertainment. It was a spectacle. They didn't care as much about the teaching, about the life-changing lesson. They were there for the show. So, why are you here? What is your because? Is it because you like the free food? Well, this is a virtual church. We don't have a lot of free food. Is it because you think the seats are comfortable? Or you really like the music? Is it because you like the chit-chat and your kids can make friends easier at school? Is that why you're at church? I mean, that's great for a while, but at some point, you got to define the relationship. Why are you here? In that passage, Jesus challenges the fan to a deeper, more intimate relationship with him. And in verse 60, here's what we read, or verse 66. And when his disciples heard this, many of them said, "This is a hard and difficult and strange saying, an offensive and unbearable message. Who can stand to hear it? Who can be expected to listen to such teaching?" But Jesus, knowing within what his disciples were complaining and protesting and grumbling about, said to them, "Is this a stumbling block and an offense to you? Does this upset and displease and shock and scandalize you? What then will be your reaction? If you should see the Son of Man ascending to the place where he was before, it is the Spirit who gives life. He is the life giver. The flesh conveys no benefit whatsoever. There is no profit in it. The words, truths that I have been speaking to you are spirit and life. But still, some of you fail to believe truth and have faith. For Jesus knew from the first who did not believe and had no faith, and who would betray him and be false to him. And he said, "This is why I told you that no one can come to me unless it is granted him, unless he's enabled to do so by the Father." After this, many of his disciples drew back, returned to their old associations, and were no longer accompanying him. A lot of them went home because Jesus said, let's define what we've got here. And what he offered isn't exactly what they wanted. And it may be time for some people just to go home, because you've come for a while and you've understood things, and yet you're coming in more for the miracles, more for the show, more of what Jesus can do for you. And he wants there to be a point where you define the relationship. Why are you here? Because, for Jesus, this because is that he wants to have a deep, personal relationship with you. He wants you to be here to worship him and not to prove how spiritual you are. Not because you're here because it's enthusiastic and exciting, entertaining. And I am so sorely afraid that there are too many in our church who have decided that, well, the reason we follow Jesus is because it's exciting. There's lots of good stuff going on, and we're here to get as much as we can out of it. And we don't want to go to church if the music's not good, and we don't want to go to church if the preacher has a dud sermon, and we don't want to go to church if it's not exciting, and we don't have the two-headed evangelist, because we're here for the wrong reasons if that's what we're here for. Okay. The second thing we need to ask ourselves is this: are you all in? See, Luke 9:23 again reminds us, and he said to all, if any person wills to come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross daily, and follow me, even unto death. Being a follower of Jesus requires complete commitment. A follower of Jesus will do whatever it takes to follow Jesus. They're absolutely loyal, completely committed. MSNBC recently did a report on the new vegetarians. Christy Pudge, age 28, captures the report. They interviewed her, and she said, well, I usually eat vegetarian, but I really like bacon. She represents a growing number of people who refer to themselves as flexitarians. Most of the time, they refuse to eat meat, but once in a while, they'll make an exception. Christy explains it this way: I really like vegetarian food, but I'm not really committed. Flexitarian is a good way to describe how many people totally view their commitments. Flexitarians are committed until it becomes inconvenient or uncomfortable, and that's why when the special is filet mignon, then our commitments can be adjusted. And that's why many Christians approach their commitment to Jesus in the Bible. I really like Jesus, but I don't really like serving the poor. I'm not really big in the idea of going to church, but my resources are spoken for, so I really can't tithe. I love Jesus, but in this area of my life, I'm not willing to surrender it. I'm not wanting to give up these friends, and when I'm in this place, I'm just not 100% committed. I want you to picture for a moment that you go to a fancy restaurant, and there sits Brian with this beautiful girl, and they're sitting there having dinner, and you walk up to him and says, where's Renee? And he says, well, date night for us is on Thursday night, and I'm out with this one tonight. And so you've got to tell Renee, you got to go home and explain to her. And so you go home and explain, well, she says, that's okay. I know he's 75% committed to me, but 25% of the time, he gets to date other people. How do you think Renee would really react if you ran to her and said, well, I just saw Brian out on a date? You don't think when he gets home, she's going, well, how, honey, how was your date? See, we know better. We know that in a marriage commitment, we expect 100% faithfulness. 100%. Thank you, Brian. You can get up now. You're a little over-dramatic there. But my point is, isn't that how we treat our relationship with Jesus Christ? Well, it's as long as it's convenient, as long as it doesn't interfere with my lifestyle, as long as it doesn't keep me from doing the things I want to do, I'll follow him. I'll worship him. I'll obey him, only when it doesn't require me to sacrifice. Only when it doesn't require me to abandon the things that I think are important. My friends, my job, my family, all the stuff we put in place ahead of him. We're not 100% sold out. And so they'll say, I want to follow Jesus, but don't ask me to forgive the person who hurt me. Don't ask me to release that bitterness and resentment. I'm not going to let that go. I get to hold the grudge. I want to follow Jesus, but don't ask me to give any of my money. I worked hard for that, and I'll follow Jesus, but don't talk to me about my sex life. I can't help my desires. We wear the name Christian, and then we pick and choose the teachings of Jesus that we're here to follow. As if the teachings of Scripture were a buffet, and all you have to do is go in and select what looks good and leave the rest of it. We would never do that in real life. Why do we think that Jesus would accept that from us in our spiritual life? On the whole, we didn't do too well with absolute commitment, do we? I think we prefer selective commitment. Simply put, we customize Christianity. Oftentimes, we look at our relationship with Jesus and say, well, I'm going to follow Jesus, but I'm kind of pick and choose the areas where I want to follow him. And so you say, well, I'll follow you, Jesus, but don't ask me to forgive that person that hurt me. I'm not going to let go of that resentment. I'm not going to let go of that bitterness. I deserve that. I deserve to hold on the grudge. I'll follow him, but don't talk to me about my money. Don't talk about my lifestyle. Don't talk to me about the things that interfere. I can't help the fact that I have all those problems and all those desires. Don't ask me to abstain. I'm a follower of Jesus, but that don't stop me from getting what I want. And so this customized Christianity that says, well, I'll follow Jesus, but only in the areas that are comfortable. Only in the areas that I agree with. I'm a Christian, but I'm not all in. I'm only about 50% involved. Folks, if that's what you're saying, if you're holding back anything, you are not a follower of Jesus Christ. You're a fan. There is not an option of selective commitment. That's not a possibility. There is no bargaining, no bantering, and no finagling. When you decide to become a follower of Jesus Christ, you either go it all or nothing. And fans, they don't like the idea of going all in. They're not wild about having to make sacrifices or about having to deny themselves or something they desire or crave. But if you've answered why you're here, then it will be pretty easy to figure out if you're all in. If you weren't here for the right reasons, chances are you won't be willing to go all in. So in defining our relationship with Jesus, we've asked, why are you here? And are you all in? And finally, we need to ask, have you made that relationship your own? Many of us started going to church because of a parent or a family member or a wife or a girlfriend or some guy we were trying to impress or some girl we were trying to impress or because of our boss. Mom made you dad said you had to. It wasn't an option. Or maybe you started coming because of a boyfriend or girlfriend or a spouse. You came because they like it when you came, and there was less problems at home when you did that. Because you came because it appealed to them. For those of us who grew up in the church or attend church in order to appease a significant other relative, it can be real easy to become a fan. If you like riding the car with someone who listens to a type of music you're impartial to, they drive you to school or work every day, and every morning they listen to Aerosmith. Now, you don't really care much about Aerosmith, and you don't really hate them. You don't really like them, but it's okay to listen to. But eventually a few songs grow on you after a little while, and you can't help but hum along to I Don't Want to Miss a Thing, so you might say you've become a fan of Aerosmith. And that can happen to us in church. We come to appease someone else, and pretty soon we get into the flow of things. We make friends, we know most of the songs, we even recognize the stories of the teachings, and we're kind of fans of Jesus. I mean, Jesus seems pretty cool. But that can be the most dangerous situation to be in. if your faith isn't your own. If you aren't pursuing a relationship with Jesus Christ and you keep coming week after week and begin to create a faith that was someone else's in the first place, you're just numbing yourself to the real thing. You become numb to real faith, comfortable with a few songs and a few favorite verses, none of which require any sacrifice or personal change. You have to make your faith your own. Jesus isn't looking for a relationship between you and your mom and him. He's not looking for a relationship between you, your wife, and him, or you, your child, and him. He's looking for a relationship with you. If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother in the sense of indifference to or a relative disregard for them in comparison with his attitude toward God, and likewise his wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, and even his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. This is not about your mom and dad. It's not about your family. It's not about your wife and kids. It's about you and Jesus. It is an exclusive relationship, and he expects you to be 100% sold out. So you begin to search your heart over the next couple of weeks as we talk, and you need to define that relationship. Where do you stand with Jesus Christ? Are you all in? Are you here? What are you here for? And have you made it your own? What really matters to you? Where are you when it comes to your relationship with him? I must admit that when I first started reading this book, I was so convicted because there are so many things that I try to hold back. There are things that I realize that, God, I don't want to give that to you because you might make me do something I don't want to do. But as I've read and as I've studied and as I've listened to how God talked to me through this message and how he's talked to me through this book, I've come to realize that there's only one option, and that is to be 100% sold out. You can't hold anything back. You really can't. You can't be just a fan. You can't go to the game and sit in the stand and watch the football players play down in the field, and when it's over, go home. It's all or nothing, folks. It always has been all or nothing. Jesus was 100% committed to dying on that cross for us. He didn't hold anything back. He sacrificed everything so that we could be saved. Don't you understand? He expects us to imitate him. He says that we're to love the church as Christ loved the church. He says husbands are to love their wives as Christ loved the church. He says that we're to be known for our love one for another. He also says that if you're not sold out, you're playing church. There isn't a halfway. There isn't a partially sold out. It doesn't work that way. There is nothing that you can hold back and not be, and you can't hold anything back. There's no way to do that. There's no way to be partially committed to Jesus Christ. There's no way to be partially committed as a believer. It's either all or it's nothing. When I was growing up, my pastor used to say that if he is not Lord of all, he is not Lord at all. Well, folks, I got news for you. The word Lord means boss and master. He is your boss. He is your master. He paid a horrible price for you to redeem you from slavery to sin. See, we don't like that word master. That's not very good. It's not a really good American word. We don't like thinking that somebody else is in control. But God isn't interested in us being in the pilot seat. He's not interested in being your co-pilot. Oh, those signs I drive thee nuts. I see somebody, God is my co-pilot, and I want to get out and scream at them, why don't you let him drive? Because I don't want God to be my co-pilot. I want him to drive. I want him to fly. I'll sit and watch. I'm better off when I'm not in the pilot seat. And so are you. So, well, we know Bill's a terrible driver, and I definitely want God to drive his car. Are you a fan? Or are you a follower? Where do you stand? Where are you in your relationship to Jesus Christ? Everybody bow their heads, close their eyes. And I don't know why I say that. It's habit. Because I really can't tell whether your heads are bowed and your eyes are closed if you're looking at the computer screen. But